Welcome back. Next, I'm delighted to introduce a headliner session from Linda Leopold, Head of Responsible AI and Data, H&M Group. And it's on the subject of responsible AI. Linda is a Swedish journalist, author, and innovation strategist. She's the former editor-in-chief of the fashion magazine Bonn, the author of 2 non-fiction books, and is now working with clients on innovation at the intersection of fashion and technology. The last 2 years, she's also been curating Fashion Tech Talks, a conference and global meeting place exploring how technology is reshaping the fashion industry. Over to you, Linda.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. A little more than a year ago, I was in Amsterdam at the 2019 edition of World Summit AI as part of a panel discussion on the topic how to build AI frameworks that are safe for the future. And if it's one thing we know about the future, it's that it's unpredictable. Fast forward a year from that panel discussion, and our world and our daily lives obviously look very, very different, far more different than anyone probably could have imagined then. Sitting on that stage, pretty close to each other, as you can see, most likely shaking hands when we met, after flying there, feels almost surreal today. As we all know, the pandemic has changed much of how our world is operating in a very short time, and it has been speeding up digitalization even more. This is Erling Persson, the founder of H&M. When he was once asked about the secret of the company's success, he answered, "There is no secret. The industry is so dynamic that it's absolutely necessary to constantly renew yourself and have a flexible mindset," which is probably more true than ever. 2020 has been a year of transformation, a year of reinvention. And today I would like to come back to the question of our panel a year ago. How do we build AI frameworks that are safe for the future, knowing that the future is extremely hard to foresee and that the tech development is moving forward with the speed of light? I don't think we ever came to a conclusion in that panel, and I'm not sure that I'm going to answer the question today either. But I would like to tell you the story of how we have approached this question at H&M Group and worked towards creating a culture of responsible AI so that we can stay grounded in our core values, but at the same time, using Erling's words, have a flexible mindset, flexible enough to work with such a moving target as AI is. I joined H&M Group in 2018, and at that time, the company had already been working with AI for a few years. Today, our AI initiatives span across the entire value chain. So to give a few examples, we are using AI to better predict demand so that we can produce the right products for our customers, the things that they really want and love. We use it for allocation to make sure that we have the right type and quantity of clothes in the right store at the right time. And we use it for personalization to give our customers more relevant recommendations and offers. And when we started to talk about responsible AI 2 years ago, I remember how we could still get surprised questions like, what do you mean by that? Why are you doing it? In an AI context, we are, after all, operating in a fairly low-risk industry, the fashion industry. But a lot has happened since then. Today, it's almost impossible to talk about AI without talking about the ethics and the societal aspects of the technology, no matter which industry you're in. And creating our responsible AI framework, we didn't start with a blank sheet. We based our goals and our tools on our existing sustainability strategy, on our human rights commitment and our company's core values. And we set these 2 overall goals for responsible AI. First, to use AI to reach our sustainability goals, such as having a climate positive value chain by 2040. And here we could clearly see the potential of AI when it comes to reducing CO2 emissions, because with the help of AI, we can be much sharper in aligning supply and demand, which also leads to less transports and less warehousing. And then secondly, to work with AI in a responsible way, which means actively working to prevent causing any unintentional harm with our AI solutions. And one of the first things that we did was to create an assessment tool, a checklist that has since then been used by all our AI teams. It contains questions centered around these 9 principles. Our AI should be focused, beneficial, fair, transparent, governed, collaborative, reliable, respecting privacy, and secure. And this checklist is a 2-page document with around 30 questions. It's long enough to cover the most important areas and short enough to be easy and practical to use. And this is a living document that we are fine-tuning as our AI journey progresses, but the main principles remain the same. We call it a checklist, but actually it's more of a conversation starter. It helps the AI teams to ask themselves the right questions. Many questions in the checklist are therefore intentionally phrased in an open way to spark a discussion. So instead of asking, does the AI product have a negative effect on any vulnerable groups? We ask, have you discussed how the AI product affects vulnerable groups? Just a tiny difference in wording that helps you think in another way and encourages you to have that conversation in your team. So if this is what we, and I assume most companies working with AI, are striving for, in reality, it's not always that simple. Even with strong company values and strong principles for responsible AI, there will most likely be situations when it's difficult for the AI teams to tell right from wrong. For example, what happens when values are in conflict with each other? Or when different stakeholders' interests clash? How do you prioritize? How do you make your decisions? We want to help our AI product teams to navigate these gray zones and to help them find the answers. And that's why we encourage conversation. If the checklist can help to find answers for real challenges, we have also created another tool where people get to think about problems that doesn't yet exist. We call it the Ethical AI Debate Club. And here people get to discuss totally fictional scenarios, ethical dilemmas related to AI, things that could potentially happen in the fashion industry in a near future. And we have arranged these debate sessions both internally and at external events. During the sessions, we give the participants an ethical dilemma. We divide them into 2 groups and give the groups a standpoint each that they have to argue for, no matter what their personal opinions on the topic are. And then, after some discussion within their groups, they meet for a debate. So I will now show you 2 examples of dilemmas that we have used in the debate club. In this first story, there is a clash between the ambition to always listen to the customer and, on the other hand, the company's values.
One of your fashion company's core values is diversity. You want every single one of your customers globally to feel included. Throughout the shopping experience, they should feel like you are talking directly to them. As part of this ambition, you are letting the customer decide what the AI-generated models on your website look like. The customer gets to choose their skin color, gender expression, and body shape. This quickly becomes a big hit. Most customers are doing it, and media praise the initiative. The customized models are only visible to the person who created them, but you have access to all the metadata. And looking at it does not reveal what you hoped for. Instead of increasing diversity, this effort has led to the promotion of an extremely narrow beauty ideal. It is like turning the clock back several decades. It is not what you wanted, but apparently what your customers want. and the customer is always right, right?
So in this case, one team would argue for keeping the service, while the other team would argue for stopping it. And sometimes we let the audience vote after the debates, and there is usually no consensus, which I think shows how difficult these questions can be, even if the right thing to do perhaps had seemed very obvious at first. And now let's listen to another dilemma. This was one of the first stories that I wrote. I had an idea of customers starting to fall in love with this very charming voice assistant.
Your company's latest voice assistant, Mauricio, has been a huge success. Sales have increased significantly since you introduced him. His voice is smooth, seductive some would say. His manners charming, and he gives the customers excellent personalized service. He knows quite a few personal details about them, based on the large amount of data you have collected with their consent. But the conversation never feels intrusive. He is well versed in fashion history, delivers the most amusing and interesting anecdotes about the clothes that your customers are looking at. After a few months, you notice that they have started to discuss other things than clothes with him. Life, love, lust. People are sharing their innermost secrets. He is such a good listener. And you are getting amazing data on customer behavior. Many of your customers are teenagers. Do you continue to use Mauricio?
One of our house rules for the debate club is not to take legal requirements into account, as that could easily kill the debate, because these debates are about values, not about interpretation of legislation. And here it's always interesting to listen to the team who gets the delicate task of arguing for keeping Mauricio. The idea with the debate club is not to solve these dilemmas. It is to help people practice their thinking and their way of reasoning, to challenge their gut feelings, and also for people to get familiar with a broad range of ethical challenges that can arise with the use of AI. The reason we do this in the form of storytelling and debate is to engage people, to spark their imagination, because our human brain loves stories. So, getting back to the question that we started with, future-proofing AI frameworks might be next to impossible, but I believe a combination of principles and discussion is the way forward. And this would be my advice for any company or organization setting up an internal framework for responsible AI today. Base the frameworks on your core values, because those will most likely not change. Strive towards making the ethical questions top of mind for everyone working with AI. Combine practical tools like assessment lists with awareness raising. Checklists are great, but they really need to be complemented by conversation. And last but not least, AI is a multidisciplinary area, so don't forget to treat it as such. Many of the ethical challenges with AI are not related to the technology itself, so make sure to get input from other areas as well. When we have arranged debate sessions, both within the company and at external events, we don't only invite people working with AI. We have had a mix of people with different backgrounds and expertise. And not only do the discussions get more interesting when all these perspectives meet, this topic is also way too important to leave just to people working with AI. After all, what we are talking about here is a technology with huge transformative power that already has a profound impact on people's lives and will have so even more in the future. It's comparable to how the internet changed the world, or probably even beyond that. But today, our conversation in society around AI is still pretty immature, and there's a lack of diverse voices. I try to remind myself as often as I can that AI may be powerful, but it's not a force of its own. It is we, humans, who are steering the development of AI. So let's strive to include as many as possible in the conversation about how we want to live with AI, so that we really can use this transformative power as a force for good. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Thank you for sharing your talk with us. Linda is now available to take any questions you may have, so please follow her into the networking lounge, the speaker Q&A room. The link to that room is going to be dropped now into the session chat on Hopin. Here on the main stage, we're taking a short break and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.